This video is for IDT 7064 over the Learning Contract module. Previously, you've worked on the needs assessment and the needs analysis, and this was where you were determining if there was a need for the instruction. Based on your needs analysis, you are going to find 4 different topics that you will be writing individual lessons about that will be into one overall unit. So if we look at the needs analysis example that we were given, in the recommendation section at the bottom, we have stated here that the students preferred instructional coaching and peer coaching. This was actually instruction meant for teachers. So this could be done where you're doing it one-on-one with a peer or in an overall group. And then based on the results, we also determined that we need to design a professional development to help with instruction, and then one to also help with planning purposes. In this one, we mentioned that we only did 1 for each, but for your requirements, you need to do 4. So based off your needs analysis results, you are finding 4 different topics that you are going to write one overall unit for. So looking at the learning contract instruction. Your learning goal is giving the learning contract template. The student will plan an instructional design project that will take approximately 50 hours to complete with 90% accuracy. So what is a learning contract? A learning contract is essentially a contract that is used to help independent studies. All of you are writing about different topics right now. You're all using different assessments, different medias. All of you have something different that you're working on. So the learning contract is going to help lay out what you're going to be doing each week and what the overall unit will look like. The first thing we start with is your unit goal, and this is something that's very broad and overall. Some of the examples we've given you are the learners will work effectively as a team leader, and the learners will become advanced users of Google Suite. So this could be something if you were giving professional development or instruction on how to use Google Suite, then that's just a very broad learning or unit goal for that topic. And over in our example that we've given you for the learning contract, after the professional development instruction, the teachers will be able to use technology-based assessment tools to design purposeful assessments that will be used to guide instruction. So here, this is again just an overall broad unit goal. It doesn't mention any specific technologies or anything to that degree. Your learning objectives is where you are getting specific. We've talked in length about ABCD objectives: audience, behavior, condition, and degree. We had some extra instruction during this course, and then I've also linked for you here the instruction for 7061.2. So this, you need to have 4 different learning objectives, 1 for each lesson that you'll be writing. Once you actually write your lessons, you might have more learning objectives in those individual documents, but for the learning contract, you only need the overall one, your main goal essentially. So make sure you have each part of the ABCD objective. Our example here, given the use of clickers, the teacher will be able to use the tool to assess students' understanding effectively with 90% accuracy. So given the use of clickers, this would be your condition. The teacher is your audience, so this was written for professional development for teachers. We'll be able to use the tool, so this would be your behavior, and your degree is 90% accuracy. Make sure you have each part of those. This is where you are finding the overall ISTE standards that you'll be using for your students or for your teachers. If you're writing instructional content for students, you're going to use the student standards. If you're writing professional development for teachers, you're using the educator standards. You only have to have 1 here. I would probably expect to see more, but you only have to have 1. As you start writing your instruction, you're going to find that you're going to need more just based on what the individual lesson plans are. So if we look over here on our learning contract example, we have 2.A, B, and C for the educators, and 7A, B, and C. And these are about designing, and these are about assessment. Your instructional types and rationale. This is coming from, again, from your needs analysis, where you just briefly talked about what your instructional type is going to be based off of you briefly talked about what your instructional type is going to be based off of the results from your survey. Here's where you're going to be giving a more in-depth analysis where you're telling which ones you're going to do. And this is based off of personal preference from the students or the teachers, but it also might depend on what your actual instruction is. Some of topics lean better to be in more small groups versus whole groups. And so that just kind of depends. But here you're giving a more in-depth rationale over what type of instructional types you're going to use. Workshop, peer coaching, instructional coaching, or larger group instruction. Your content analysis, this is where you're taking your learning objectives from the part above, and you're starting to think about what your task is going to be and what your assessment is going to be. Now, your assessment must be aligned to meet your learning objectives. So this should go directly with this, okay? Your task is where you are giving just a generic description about what they are going to be doing. I'm not expecting to see a detailed lesson plan here, but this is just an overall what they will be doing during the lesson. So you should have one row for each of your lessons. So here we have Plickers, GradeCam, then the eBeam software, and then the Camtasia editing software. So you have one learning goal from above. Your assessment matches your learning goal. So it's going to be used to assess your learning goal here. And then in the middle, you have your instruction about what they would be doing during the lesson. And this is also essentially your lessons checkpoint. Okay, your lessons checkpoint comes from a synopsis from above, what your learning goal was, what your direction was. So your lesson plan topic, this is just the overall. Your multimedia resource. So you need to start thinking about what kind of multimedia tool am I going to use for my lesson plan topic. If you refer back to your unit design project description, and I would encourage you to refer back to this several times throughout the course of the unit to make sure that you're meeting all of the topics and all of the requirements. But if we look at number 8, one of your requirements is that you must use at least 3 different tools in your design, and we've given you a list of over 60 different tools for you to refer back to, and we've talked about so many different ones throughout the course of the EdTech certificate. So you need to pick one for each topic and start thinking about how you would use that during your lesson. And then your assessment, and your assessment is just an overall of what you talked about up here, but you will actually be turning in an assessment each week. The actual assessment, if you're writing it for students, this would be the actual test or the actual description of the assignment or the project, and you will also turn in an exemplar of the project as well. So this is what you are expected to turn in for each lesson. Lesson 1, you would turn in this, 2, 3, and then 4. Okay. So some things to keep in mind. Your unit should take roughly 50 hours to complete. So that's over the course of the next several weeks. You're expected to do 50 design hours over your unit. This is not going to be something that you're going to be able to work on in just one day. And I would not encourage you to work on it on one day because it would not have the degree of caliber that I would expect to see. The learning contract has to be improved, so I have to review over it. I have to agree that these are the things that you're going to do. I might give you some suggestions. I'm going to make sure that your learning objectives and your assessments are aligned to each other. I might give you a suggestion for a different multimedia resource that I think would go really well with the lesson. While those things are suggestions, some of those things will be need to be updated in your learning contract. This can be one of the most difficult parts of the project where you're thinking about ahead of time, what are you going to be doing? But having this as a good goal and an outline is going to help make the rest of the semester go much smoother. And this is a living document. This might change as you are writing your instruction and you realize, I'm not going to do this assessment. I'm going to do another type of assessment. And that's okay. Just make sure that everything gets approved and that you're just in communication with me about it all. So in your assignment document here, you have the link to the instructional that we just talked about. You have a link to the template, and you have a link to the example that we've given you. Remember that this example wasn't created with the same requirements that we have, but make sure that you're meeting all of our requirements. Okay? And then here's the rubric. So you have your unit goals, your learning objectives, ISTE student and ISTE educator, instructional types and rationale, content analysis, and then your lesson plan checkpoints. All of this is worth 50 points. Make sure that you're going back over your unit design to refresh your memory about what are the different things that are needed during each lesson plan, about the different types of technology, about the different topics from the EdTech courses that you have to include, different things like that. Make sure that you're paying attention to this as well. If you have any questions, make sure that you email me and I'd be glad to help.